Life the Battlefield is more than just a podcast. It's a lifeline for those navigating life's toughest challenges. And today we bring you a story of resilience, survival, and redemption. So if you ever face the heartbreak of separation, the brutality of divorce, or the seemingly so many challenges of family law, this episode is for you. Our guest, Graham McFarland, knows these battles firsthand. He's lived through financial ruin, homelessness, and the agony of parental alienation, only to rise stronger. Not just for himself, but for all of you, for the thousands of others walking the same path. From promising career in electronics to becoming a relentless advocate for men's health and family law reform, Graham's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. His fight has reached the highest levels of government, and his story will inspire and empower all of you. So get ready for conversation that is raw, real, and potentially life-changing. Welcome, Graham. Welcome, Graham, to the podcast studio Life the Battlefield.
Thanks, Mara, for having me.
Look, today it's a special day, and I want to say thank you for finding time and sharing your journey, particularly your book, which is going to help so many people around the globe, not just in Australia. So before we continue, just want to ask you, why did you write your book, Surviving Separation? That's my first question. What possessed you to write a book, Surviving Separation?
I think recently, I've just come to the conclusion that everyone who's going through divorce and separation have these issues. And over the years, and it's almost 15 years now that I've just been supporting and helping people navigate, divorce and separation. I feel like I'm just paraphrasing. I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm only really helping my local community, if that makes sense. And I thought, well, if I can put it into a book, this isn't a book about my opinion. This isn't a book about only my experience. This is a book someone can pick up, whether you're going through it or whether you're a support, you're someone who's a friend or family. And it navigates particularly Australian law, but not just Australian law, but the emotions behind, part of my journey, but what I see very common and all the mistakes that everyone makes. I got to the stage when people were coming to me that I can almost tell at what stage they were on that timeline, that roller coaster. And I also found if I gave them too much information too quickly, their hopes grew, and people just get disappointed in process. But I'm a big believer if you actually learn the process, if you actually learn, in our case, the Australian Constitution or the Family Law Act, and you actually learn what it means and what's it actually saying, what the idea of it, what's the mechanism, you actually have a better understanding. And in the book, it talks a lot about how it brings the worst out of people, separation. There's a lot of reasons for it.
Oh, yeah, I can concur with this one because one thing nobody plan or contemplate when you meet somebody that, you're going to have the separation at the end, right? Everybody goes with the high hopes, love, emotions. You build a life, you build the assets together. You make it kids together.
Yes.
And then suddenly, just with the shock of the pain or some phone call, you can't see your kids anymore. And you need to step up into the abyss of pain and horror of the family law.
And a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
But what I found is some guys, in particular men, who want to solve problems quickly. This isn't a quick process.
Yes.
Next minute they're dealing with New South Wales Police. And for most Australians, we don't deal with New South Wales Police. They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
But when you start engaging with them and they're starting to follow that plan of the Family Law Act, or if it's in regards to violence, for example, all they want to do is resolve it and stop it and just pause it so nobody gets hurt. But for men, it's like, I need an answer now and I want to act on it. I want to get it resolved. And
so there's a lot of heated emotional, actually, steam behind that engine, you know what I mean,
Correct.
when the police comes. But let's go start now. When we introduced it, the reason of your book, we today are going to present Surviving Separation. I have a question for you. You grew up in a big family. You lost your father at 13, and
Yes.
you need to step up into a leadership role, a literally leadership role at age 13. Now, how that shape you become man today? How did that shape your persona today, your character from age 13, losing your father?
Being a very Australian family, but Irish heritage, we didn't have a lot, and we're always, Dad had a big part of my life, particularly around community. We used to deliver food to the needy, furniture, all that sort of stuff back then. But when he passed, I'm the second oldest of 6, and my older brother was there for a few years, but then he moved on to the Australian Army. If I wanted something, I had to work for it. And when you're 14, 15, 16 and your world around you are getting things and you're not, because your mother couldn't afford it, or there's just no money, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
You start little businesses, you start learning how money works, how important it is.
Yeah.
And when you make a purchase, you're making sure you're buying something that lasts a long time. There's a lot of messages in that. When I got my car license, I became a taxi driver for my siblings. That's just part of the role. Trying to help mum out. My other brothers, were helping out too in all our different ways. I started a proper permanent role in a business at the age of 16 while I was still at school, so I didn't have any personal time. We missed out on our childhood, I suppose. But
because that's good. I'm so trapped today, because I'm very curious now, because that is the stage of your life when you experience homelessness, debts as well, accumulating your life. How did you face these obstacles, Graham? Because being 13, again, it's quite emotional for me now. Listen, this is the man I know. I know, guys, Graham, for so many years, and in my introduction, you heard how Graham and his team helped me. But you're not a man who does crime and river stories, but I can see little Graham, 13 years old, helping his mom, taxi driver license, your brothers and everything else, debts. And how did you face these obstacles? Why didn't you give up, Graham? Why didn't you give up on life?
You're not allowed to give up.
Okay, can you share more with that one?
You're here for a reason.
Okay.
You're allowed to live. You're allowed to be around people. You're allowed to have a life. And I was trying to think about this before I came in. Life's like chapters in a book. I'm bringing it, I wrote a book, but when you write a book, you talk about chapters. A chapter opens and closes. It leads into the next chapter. But in your life, my world as a 13-year-old was totally different to my life as a 16-year-old when I started having more responsibilities. And then, buying my first home at the age 22, being successful. And when you see success through the bad experiences and you come out at the other side, you understand that you got to work hard. And you got to put everything you've got into it. It doesn't mean you need to be perfect. People are too worried about getting somewhere. But what I've learned over the years is it's the journey getting there is life, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I do agree with you. Now, if you bring us a little bit forward in your life, because your life was not short of hardships, of obstacles. And this podcast is to equip people, to arm them with the knowledge and experience of people like yourself, basically. Who are 24/7 living the life of 99% of the people on this planet Earth, facing obstacles, uncertainties and separations and, being separate from your kids. Now, my question is, if you bring us the moment in your life, that particular moment in your life, of your wife's betrayal and what was going through your mind, because I can pinpoint in your book and our conversations that was a moment when your life actually changed.
My life fell apart.
Can you just expand this so everybody can
The moment. So, you talk about before you talked about people having a journey with a partner, and you're talking about planning and life and children. So you've got the career of you're loving your career. You've got all the toys. You're investing in properties. You moved to the Central Coast. I was living the dream, and I was doing it with a partner. And then, and just to frame it a little bit to give you an idea what else was going on in my life at the time, it was to be my 30th birthday. It was going to be Father's Day. My birthday falls on Father's Day almost every year. I was at a very good friend of mine. She'd been a friend maybe over 14 years. She was getting married. I was the videographer at her wedding. Supported them with many things, as you do with friends in the previous years. And after the wedding, almost at the stroke of midnight, I found out that the groom and my wife at the time were having an affair. And that's a long story that night, but imagine your world just stops. Everything you know, everything you trust, and trust is important, you to believe in people and trust in people, and then they let you down. You start questioning everything. And the journey from that was I experienced, obviously had to sell everything because it was joint, had a lot of lawyers telling me what I need to do. I had my finance guy saying to get out of stuff. I went into extreme debt. My outgoings exceeded my incomings. I was at a stage between finding places, often lent on the parents a lot. You don't want to move back in with your parents at the age of 30.
Yeah.
And you're putting strain on people that don't have a lot, and you're there putting that strain on, and you're looking for financial solutions, and becoming homeless. The state of homeless basically means you don't have somewhere that you can call. You don't have a bed.
Yes.
And whether it's lying, and not many people know this, but sleeping in a car, it's not cool. But right now, I can tell you, across Sydney, there's many people doing it if you know where to look. And they haven't done anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong.
Can I ask you a question, personal question? Emotionally, you've been broken.
Sure.
Because
yeah.
Suddenly your life is just collapsed, right? Everything what you build with your wife and everything else. The debt is the one thing which all us make either happy or unhappy. We have money, we don't have money, but extreme debt is something what actually it's weighs tons and tons. It's crushing us. How did you feel emotional to every dad? If you can translate your experience to every father over there, the man who's going currently right now, what they can learn from you and how you felt, and what they can learn from you, how they can survive next day.
There's a couple of messages I've got is firstly, you're not alone. That's the biggest thing I want to say, because everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has experiences. You're going through something right now, and it's huge. I'm not going to discount that. Yeah. But at the same time, the life after it is amazing. I can talk about my story, about my life today. It's amazing. And to get through that storm, the storms are never there forever. And the comment my mother used to always say was, everything will be just fine. Exact words. Everything will be just fine. Yes, you're trying to pay that bill. Yes, you've got creditors hitting on the door. Yes, you've got child support making hell out of your life. Yes, you've got that other person you used to have a relationship with, always communicating. And my book's about that as well, is how do you deal with all that? I call it noise. You got to have a goal. Even in business, you have a goal. In sport, you have a goal. Well, in life, you have a goal. And it's okay to want things. And I'm not talking about a boat, a bike, whatever. I'm talking about wanting to be happy. It's good. It's okay to be happy. And the biggest thing dads have trouble with is being happy when they're away from their kids. It's like a guilt comes across you that you're having a good day, but potentially your kids are not.
My question, next one, we're heading quite into emotional questions, and it's not easy to talk about these things without being stirred and shaken at the same time, because you talk about your very painful past, which, as you said, sounds very interesting. If we know where to look, we're going to see many dads now, this very moment sleeping in a car.
Sure.
Right? But we are more worried about things we can't even, fix it in the world. You know what I mean? We have our problems, but we are more worried about things which we can't even fix it, world problems and all these things. My question is around the children. So you gone through that stage when you find out your now ex-wife, she's with a groom who has an affair. But your kids are involved. So let's go talk about parental alienation. It's a silent but brutal battle. And my question is, what did you go through and how did you keep fighting?
I think there's a lot of parts of this because the term parental alienation, if you go back to my time, it was suggested it doesn't exist. It's a fictitious term. The community was saying, what are you talking about? So for men, even before my generation, the fact that parental alienation occurs, which is one parent not allowing the other parent to coexist, and that you actually have got 2 nights a fortnight, in my case, if you're lucky, 2 nights a fortnight, and then often you'll have a particular time you turn up and they're not there. So you go a month without them, trying to communicate with your kids on a daily basis. But the problem I always share is it's something emotion you're going through. And you've almost got to park that, like men have to do with a lot of things in life, and think about the children. What are the children going through? So my daughter was 5, turning 6 at the time. My son was 1. So I missed my son's childhood. My son lives with me today and I've got a great relationship with him. But to miss out on that's painful because I was really close with my daughter. We spent every breathing moment. I spend time with her before anyone else. And that was taken away from me.
Who told you cancer job today? Like, when did you find out that you can't see your kids anymore?
When you're not living in the house and you're trying to commute into the environment and there's no communication, you're going to the front door and the door's not being open. You can hear them inside. But you've got to be very careful, particularly in today, because there's a lot of laws that basically can be enforced. And that's also written in the book is you've got to be very careful that you don't come across as being intimidating, because the perception of intimidation is a crime now. So if you actually...
Perception of intimidation.
Correct. So if you feel like you are threatened, you have cause and to call the police, rightly or wrongly. And the police aren't there to be the adjudicators. The police are there to separate any potential risk. So in their world, they just remove you. And whether you have the rights or court orders or anything to be there, that they always will say you need to deal this is a civil matter and you'll need to deal with this in the actual family court. Well, it's not a civil matter, it's a court order, but they're not there to actually manage the
I can understand police because after all, every police officer is a human being.
Correct.
And they have their own families. They maybe have their own things, but they are there, as you say, to enforce the law.
It actually took two close mates who were police officers that they could see me hurting from a distance, and both of them reached out. And when they reached out and they started talking to me about the life of a policeman, I'm actually an assistant commissioner's nephew, right? So, but this is old school. And understanding the law is probably important here, because if you understand the role of a police officer and you understand the role of the court system, you won't get emotional with the police. But we do, because we're in an emotional state. We have our rights. We're fighting for our rights, and we've got the right to be a parent. And someone is pushing the boundaries, and then you that's where this emotion. My advice to gents is, it's like running a business, and you've got to have a business plan, and then you need to be nimble in business plans, but you don't react to your competition. Competition is there all the time.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So I think you just need to be very cautious, because it's not about today's relationship with your children. It's about tomorrow's relationship with your children. Now, if your children they know kids are smart. They know you're around. They know you're contributing, right? If you're with your kids for 1 hour, you give 100% attention. Now, in today's world, I chuckle because we've got so many distractions. So if you've got your kids, no phones, no iPads, do stuff outside, get creative. And I did eventually, when I started to learn what, the right way to get through this, plan things that they're not experiencing, go fishing, do colouring books, whatever. We had cooking at home, like things that I generally wouldn't have thought of doing.
Can I ask you, I heard some stories, right? I had some guests here as well who's gone through not such a quite extreme case like your one, but they said to me, I couldn't see my kids for 6 months. Then I was being allowed to see my kids 2 days per week, but under supervision, and that was in McDonald's. And he says my heart was breaking, right?
Yep. Seen it 1,000 times.
Who decide this, that I can see my own kid?
So then in that instance, what's happened is there's been an accusation of some sort, and there's a perception that potentially there could be some threat to violence to the children. And in the family court, it's about the children, okay? And if you understand the process and you understand it's about the safety of the children, you're talking to strangers to make decisions around their safety, and no police officer wants to go home at night knowing that they walked away from a situation and children get harmed, So you got to understand that, right? So in his situation, it sucks, yes, but you need to think about the long-term game. The fact that you turned up to McDonald's and the kids, they will react differently than you're used to. They're going through stuff as well. Don't judge them. Never judge your children because they don't know the answers.
They don't know,
And they don't probably have a great support mechanism happening in their life on the other side. And in my case, that was the case. They saw more harm and disappointment living in another world from me. And I knew that wasn't a good place, and I fought. But at the end of the day, I created a better world that attracted them, and that's the secret. The secret to this is giving your kids your best, and giving your kids what they deserve, and slowly but surely they'll find their way. My kids decided what was right and wrong. I didn't have to preach it. I never talked ill of their mother in front of them. I did a lot in the background, but you'd never ever.
Was a beep.
But the point really is you let your children, and they're angry, let your children work through it. It may take time. A lot of dads, it can take 16 years. My daughter's relationship and I was on and off for many years. But they've got the other challenges in life as teenagers. Like every teenager's got challenges outside of mum and dad.
Yes.
And you're just overlaying more problems on top of it. So you've just got to be...
You speak this very nicely. I truly believe that this is not easy to go through it. You know what I mean? When it's happened to you, there's a distance between those events in your past and right now where we are here in the studio, right?
Yeah, sure.
So we can reflect this and say that was in the past, right? But many dads going right now through this ordeal. And I just want to say, I'm very thankful and grateful that you're not just a dad who just preaching about his case, because the difference in my eyes, between the heroes and the leaders is between those who talks and those who do something.
Sure.
And you show the balls to do something. You've gone into the face of many politicians. You've gone against, I would say
I faced the devil.
Yeah, you faced
many
the devil.
ways.
So let's start with this one, because you started, you found support in dads in distress, right?
Yeah. So at my times, we're talking 2005, 2006, the internet really wasn't bubbling along as it is today.
Yeah, it's not far away. It was 20 years ago only, man.
Yeah, and it was very, very simple. You'd go to a website, very, very basic websites. I was frustrated. I was looking for information because there was nothing. I couldn't get support from counsellors. They didn't understand that world. There was no mechanism for particularly what the man was going through. The laws were against you. They were stacked up against you. They still are. And I can explain that later of how you work with that. And that book talks about how to work with the law. It's not easy. You need to get advice from many, many people, because people have opinions, and that's what they are. They're opinions.
That is correct. That's how when I sell it. This is what I say to ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to put in a description a link on Graham's book. And as you know, this podcast, it's about life battles. And I don't appreciate opinions because that makes a difference between the winner and loser. Graham, he's going to demonstrate you how you can go to that ordeal easier because he faced these obstacles and he fought for many dads. And that is what is your book about, right? You try to untangle that web of the problems. So when you say like you need a lot of advice, professional advice, that advice doesn't come for free.
No, it doesn't. And often you don't know if you're buying the right advice either. So you need to distinguish what you're trying to achieve and what's emotion. So goals are goals, okay? They're yours, but not a lawyer's. The lawyer's responsibility is to find the legal aspect, put a place, work on a process, work on the law itself. So you need to have good people around you. Today it's a lot easier. You've got YouTubers, you've got environments that you can just watch.
Yeah, but it's a forest.
It is a forest. But what you need to do beforehand, and there's a reference in the book, is educate yourself on the law to start with. That's ground zero.
That's interesting.
Ground zero is the law. You recognise the law, and then you recognise interpretation of the law. What does that mean? So you talk about parental alienation. When I was around, that wasn't a recognised element within the law. Does that make sense?
So 20 years ago, like this parental alienation
was a challenge thing from the movement that I was in. It was not something that was recognised within law.
Did you find a lot of people actually go against that narrative? You tried to explain that there is parental...
yeah, and there's many, many heroes that I in my network that have fought for many, many years around that. The reason I went through Parliament, the reason I went to see politicians, the reason I did petitions for the Minister for Men, like all these things is because that's the vehicle, the law, the vehicle of the interpretation of the law. And quite frankly, if you read the law and your experience may not equal each other. So the way
Can I ask you, why is a man always... I'm the man after all, right?
Yes.
So I want to ask, why is a man always depicted in a marriage or relationship as a villain, monster, and some moron who's gonna is there to destroy somebody? Because
there's a lot of history to it. So we have a no-fault policy in Australian law. So 1975 they changed no-fault divorce, but before that.
What does that mean?
What it means is before 1975, if you wanted to divorce your partner, it actually meant that you would actually have to prove why you're separating. So if you had infidelity, you would actually become someone that would obviously be the reason for the divorce. So therefore the other person gets everything. So,
but your wife cheated on you.
That changed in 1975. I was born in 1975.
Okay.
So it's no fault found now.
Okay.
And this is the hardest part to understand is your whole world has changed because of a cheating partner.
Yeah.
That's got nothing to do with the law. The law's premise today is the children. And if you understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're talking about separation, divorce, you're talking about, having time with your kids or kids living with you, all those arrangements. Well, it starts in the middle now. So it starts at 50-50 and then they work through the noise to work out what's the best interest of the children. For example, in my case, I could create a better environment for my children, but my ex, I could have created a better thing, but I had to go to work.
Of course you need to go.
So who looks after my kids while I'm working?
Yeah.
But with my ex, she could be at home with the kids because she had an income, which was my child support.
Can I ask a question? Okay, I tried to now to shape this conversation into something what I was watching last night, Muffs Made at First Sight, right? So all these couples...
shouldn't have done that.
I know. No, but it's depicting something what you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
How much nastiness and how much dirty laundry has been exposed in separations and divorce, right? Not just from the woman's side, but from the man's side as well. So in that particular couple, he explained about every girl what he thinks and what she did. She didn't like his response as his wife. She's gone to some other couple and told everybody what he said about every woman in a group. And I think to myself, why would you do this? It's your husband. Why would you put him in such a deep shit, right? Now, you said something at the beginning that there is a lot of mess at the beginning, during separation. So partners accusing each other. They're pulling all the dirt they have.
Yes.
Why is that? Because if you and I married, I mean, just a figure of speech, but, why would you say all the ugly things about me, well, you didn't mind while we are married, but suddenly you want kids more than
What's marriage? Marriage is trust. Marriage is respect.
That's correct, sir.
Marriage is believing in someone.
Yeah.
Okay. I lost trust. I lost belief. I lost faith in my wife at the time.
Yeah.
So that's gone.
Yeah, okay.
So now you've got the one thing that's left in your life is your children. You're still trying to understand the why. Why do things happen?
Yeah.
My message is it's not important.
Yeah.
You can learn from your past, but you move forward. But everyone's fighting for kids, possessions, finances. It's not important.
Yeah, but that comes on the court, and the magistrate says like, interesting. And hurts other side.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, it comes back to the children. So if, for example, you're talking about money, well, how can that money be used to support the children's welfare? In regards to separation and divorce, people start fighting for, obviously, they've earned 20 years' worth of investments and now I've got to give 50% of it away. It's not easy. And my message with particularly men is, you knew that with the day that you walked into that relationship. You knew that you were building a life with that partner. You knew you were marrying someone and you might be the main income earner, but geez, the other person was doing a lot to let you do that. To be a family.
Look, I still try to understand, those things, what you're going through. And as I said, like that leads me to the next question, because there is a lot of many men who suffer right now in the silence, literally suffer.
Yep.
And you said this very well. If we know where to look for, we're going to find dads in the car and try to survive another day. My question is, what was a turning point for you, Graham McFarland, become the advocate for the dads? What was that turning point for you, Graham, that you become that advocate?
Someone reached out quite early, probably 3 years after the fact, and said, "Hey, I heard about your story, and my son's going through it as well. Can you have a chat with him?" And I'm thinking, well, what value could I add? And by talking to that person, it was over the phone at the time. By talking to that person, I actually was able to realise for myself is, hey, I'm at 80% done. I've been through I made all the mistakes, been all through the challenges, and here's a guy that's on week one. Here's a guy that blindsided the same way I was, very common. He didn't know where he was, Arthur or Martha. There's an expression. He didn't know which way he was going.
Arthur, Martha. Okay, that's a good one. I never heard that one. Okay,
so he just didn't know what day of the week it was, and just listening to his story. And in the early days, I used to try to give advice and guide them the way I thought was right, which I learned was not right. But what was right was listening. Now, one of the comments I make in my book is you have a lot of people around you that love you and they want to help you. And dads, as in parents and uncles and stuff, and they don't know what you're going through. They never will. Even if they had separation, their one's totally different to yours. Everyone's is different. But they want to solve the problem. They start telling you what you need to do. They start telling you need to do this and that. And it's hard because you love them for the fact that they're trying to help. But at the same time, they're probably not giving you the right advice. So what actually happened with myself is I started recognising more and more men. And Dads in Distress was a really good example. Tony was a guy with a bunch of mates in northern New South Wales that had recognised this problem from generational issues. And they'd already had this platform of, helping, but they weren't in Sydney. I was in Sydney.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So I got to a stage, I remember I was broke. I couldn't afford to pay my mobile phone bill. I was earning really good money, but it wasn't going in my pocket. It was going to child support. It was going in the debt that I'd accumulated. I'm living in the third bedroom of a parents' house. They didn't have the space for me. You know, their garage was full of anything I had left, and I came across Dads in Distress. I can't even remember how I came across it. It wasn't given to me. Eventually, I started listening to their little, back in those days, little videos on the website.
Yeah.
And Tony was all about believing in yourself and believing in there's a tomorrow and putting a plan in place and what's your challenge today? Yeah, right. Well, that's today's challenge. That's fine. You know, like just a bit flamboyant about it, but giving you faith that tomorrow is going to turn up and you'll be there tomorrow. So if I had a bill to pay today, can I pay it? No. Okay.
Can I ask you one question? It's not related to this one, but I try to understand this for the old dads who are currently experiencing, as you say, day one, because, you know, I love your honesty, how you say, like, okay, I understand him now. He's in the first week of the pain. You were 3 weeks,
sure.
80% you gone through this. So you know what man's going to go through this and what they can expect. But do you believe that there is some type of enjoyment that other party, ex-wives or whatever, husbands, whatever they are, enjoying inflicting that pain?
It's a battlefield. What happens in war?
Well,
they're taking inches. Yes, they do. Yeah.
Did you feel that way in your case?
100%.
Can I ask that question?
100%. So if I was emotional about not getting something that was due or I felt was right, and the other person put a barrier in place, knowing that I'd be upset about it, that when I got upset about it and communicated back to that person that I was upset, it was like it was a plan. They were enjoying the fact that I was.
So you think that other
very vindictive, and that's part of the message. Is you need to identify that early. That's human behaviour, unfortunately, both ways. Unfortunately, you've got to identify why that's happened, and you also have to put it to the side and say it's not important. So when something didn't go my way, if I needed to vent, to talk about it, you do never ever talk about it to your ex. and
why is that? Tell us, Graham. Why is that? All dads, I want you to hear this because on a live to battlefield, Graham is gonna equip you right now with something you'd never heard before. Graham, why the man shouldn't went back to his ex-partner?
Well, very high level, your relationship's dead. Okay, the marriage is null and void.
Yeah.
There's no responsibility. You do not have a connection with that person anymore. Do not give them 1% of how you're feeling. Don't give them any information outside of what they're requiring. And if you need to vent, find a friend, but not a common friend, because common friends will let information go back to them. Yeah. And I learned that the hard way many times. But the point that I'm trying to say is you just give yes/no answers. So if there's a question in front of you, don't answer the narrative, just answer the question. The other thing I say is if you find it's becoming heated, pause. There's no law that says that if I get a text message at 10:20 that I have to answer it within 10 minutes. You can answer it. You can answer it the next day.
Yes.
If you're feeling something, you need to get it off your chest. Write it down. Put it to the side. Deal with it tomorrow. If you need to communicate, I don't like text messaging because it's instant. So anything that's instant, don't do. So email's fantastic. It's the best form of communication.
Is this in your book?
It's in my book.
Okay, that's a good one.
So the concept of communicating with someone that you don't have a relationship with anymore, and they'll argue that you do have a relationship.
Yeah.
That's how they really manipulate that you've still got a relationship because you've got children together. Yes, we had children together, but we're not together anymore. So we're both parents, and I'm going to be a parent to my children.
I don't know how you look at 20 years ago. How you felt? You know, I can just imagine.
Yeah.
But I'm glad, Graham, that you're here today. I'm glad that you're going to be the literally IV direct into the veins of many dads to give them, little that energy they need to fight, in a proper way instead of being reprimanded for their emotional behavior rather than rational behavior. So as you say, if I receive the message 10 20, there is no law to, to reply
no law at all.
in 10 minutes, right?
You won't find it anywhere.
Okay.
Nah, and, what's an emergency? Let's define what's an emergency for children.
Yeah.
The only thing that's an emergency for children has the name on the front door. It's called the emergency department. That's an emergency. So if you've got an emergency because they couldn't pay a bill, that's not an emergency. If it's an emergency, they didn't have football shoes to go to the soccer game that night, it's not an emergency.
You created an emergency. I'll tell you why. Yeah. Because you went beyond your personal battles and you took the battle back to the legal system, right? You as well run for the federal parliament.
Yes.
And, you talk to politicians. So you created a national emergency. For that, Graham, thanks a lot of courage.
Yeah, look, and in modestly, there's a lot of Grahams out there. So there was a big movement that did a lot of things. I contributed.
What was your obstacles? And you run for the federal parliament.
Yep.
So you create emergency, you step it out, you put petrol in the tank and say, okay, I need to now drive all the way to the top with the message about this, what's happened to the man during separation.
There was a group of men who particularly were in the same world that I was, at parental alienation, paying a lot out, not seeing the kids.
Yeah.
And we went to a lot of state and federal politicians all over Australia.
Yeah.
The reality is politicians, they're not the vehicle for this problem. Sadly, you would think they would be, because if they were the solution,
why they're not?
Because they've got a 3-year term or a 4-year term. They've got a political party they answer to. They need to make sure that they get voted in. So if this is not the number one thing that community's asking for, they're not going to focus on it.
Okay, so who is the department or the legal part of the society responsible for that?
That's a good question. It really is a good question. Why? Because the family law court is a place, the family law is a document, and the environment bubbles along often by, people's events, right?
Okay.
So the law's there. And this is why my message is read the law. The law is there.
But the law needs to be voted.
Not so much. The law needs to be followed. Someone needs to agree that law is going to be implemented. Isn't that parliament? But that was our process. Was not so much. There's something underlining here, Murray. It's not so much the law's wrong. The law's not been followed.
Okay.
Okay. So if you were, for example, to create perjury within a courtroom, you get in trouble, and there's outcomes to that, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I would ask anyone to do their research. If anyone was to present false narrative, false information, false accusations in a courtroom, and it was proven that they were creating false narrative, give me one court case in Australia where they've gone to jail, which is the crime. And you won't find it.
No, I just want to say, I can't... I never heard on TV, right? Maybe
it's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. So you've got over 400,000 different events happening a year, and you've got people fighting and a lot of emotion, and they're saying the wrong things and not putting everything on the table and not thinking about the children first. They're thinking about themselves. They're being vindictive, narcissistic. They want control. Everybody wants control. And you're going into a room that has a process, and you've got a good lawyer. What's the lawyer going to do? He's going to present everything, or she's going to present everything possible to tarnish the other party and so that they win the court case.
If you could change, now on that note, right? Mm-hmm. So if you could change any part of the law or legislation regarding separation, child custody, what would Graham McFarland change?
I would put money into the system at the front end.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah. So
what do you mean, front?
Well, it can take up to 18 months to 2.5 years if you're fighting for rights and assets. The children part could take 12 months for a decision.
Say again, how long takes?
It could take years. So you get separated on the 1st of January, right? Yeah. When separation, before you can get divorced, you have to be separated for 12 months to start with, right? And at the end of that 12 months, then you can apply for divorce. That's the marriage done.
Marriage,
right?
okay.
But that's got nothing to do with custody.
Okay.
So that conversation's, because it's so busy, that may not be seen in court for 2, 3, 4 months. There's a delay there. The process takes so long.
Okay, guide me now. Treat me as a 5 years old now, as a dumbass, literally
Yep.
dumbass. Who has a custody of the kids in that period?
The mother.
That doesn't make sense. Why not father? Like nobody spoke to you.
And here's the unfortunate part to all of this, and there's a couple of different ways to answer that. The first part is when the separation occurred,
Yes.
someone has to leave the house, don't they? So that's the reality. Someone has to leave the house. How does that person get moved out of that house?
Okay, please
right?
continue. Yeah, okay.
So the person that leaves the house then loses some rights if there's an accusation, if someone feels threatened, feels they're being intimidated.
Okay.
So then boundaries are put in place. Now, these boundaries are put in place usually by the police because they don't remember that police conversation we had?
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So some boundaries are put in place to make it a safe environment for the children. So in my case, it was different. It was I was not going to be able to be a full-time employee and look after my children. So my ex had the responsibility of looking after my children. But then I had no access because I was not inside the house anymore. You don't have free roam to walk in the front door. It's not your place. What if you were accused of violence? Now, you can suggest
accused.
that... You can
even there is no evidence.
Accused, yeah. Once there's an accusation put in place, you can have orders put in place to restrict interaction. It's different levels of severity, but you might find that there's something put in place so that you don't just randomly turn up and interrupt their life.
Yeah.
So you can't just turn up on a Saturday morning and knock on the door, I want to see my kids. You can't do that. You need to understand that.
Look, I try to understand, I try to understand all of these because as you said, there's hundreds of, if not thousands of dads right now going through their first week of hell. I didn't know that it takes up to 2 years before you have your custody case, so like 12 months.
And keep in mind, not everything goes through court, but you need to, if you start late on your process and you don't treat it like a business, you don't have a plan, and you think you're relying on an emotion or a comment that's been made to you by the other person, you've got all your goal is to see your kids, right? That's all your goal is, to see your kids. And you have this light at the end of the tunnel that says that this Saturday you're going to get your kids, and then you get there and they're not there. You're not focused on anything else in life. And that can be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then you need help. Go to the police. It's not a police matter. It's a civil matter. Then you go get a lawyer. Then you got to book in a meeting. Then they've got to look at your case. Then they might do a letter of demand. The letter of demand could be 2 weeks. So now you're already at 2 months.
So
then you want to apply for court orders. Well, then you got to enter that system. Then you got to get the other person to engage. And that takes time. Then they've got to get a lawyer. So where are you now? 3-4 months down the track. How much money have you spent?
I want to ask you something which is very tricky. We don't read this in newspapers. We are more, when you see the news in Australia, depicting a lot of people miseries, and problems and, these things. But there is a big thing in Australia called the mental health. Everyone loves to talk about mental health. Mm-hmm. Many people love to go in these gala dinners. Are you okay? Take the pictures. Look at me. I contributed $2 to Salvation Army.
Yep.
I want it from you right now, right here, for every dad. I want you to spill out.
Stop spending your money on these ridiculous NGOs, non-government organisations.
I want to know that mental health.
Yeah.
How is mental health affected? And I want it from you, statistically speaking. Do you have the access to this information publicly?
Yep.
How many dads, they don't see any more light at the end of the tunnel because of that situation?
If I want to talk about this, everyone has an opinion. Remember the opinion story earlier? So I'm going to frame this answer. The first thing you need to do is go get the facts. in Australia, there's only one source of facts. Where do you find that? And maybe you can drop the websites on it later, but the Department of Statistics, it's their job to get the numbers together. Every policy is driven based off the statistics. So if a government wants to put a health solution in place, they'll go and look at the numbers of where they're going to get their best outcome for the revenue you're going to put into it, like a business. Yeah. But what I struggle with is you might use an indicator of suicide. You might use an indicator of attempt suicide. But the suicide rates since I started this journey have not changed. Can you believe that?
I don't know what was 20 years ago or what's today.
So you're still looking at ratio, the numbers, and I'll give you 2019, 75% of suicides is male, 2,514 men that passed away that year. 2020, 2,388 men passed away, 75.8% of all suicides. 21, we had 2,375 men passed away from suicide. 74.9% of them were men of all suicides in the year. 2023, 2,390 men passed away from suicide. That's 75% of all suicides. But that's unfortunately the result. But the outcome, if you look at responses to men experiencing suicidal intentions, there was 16,800 phone calls made for help because I'm thinking of suicidal tendencies. And 44% of those were diagnosed with a mental disorder. So a lot of people question me and say they have their variation or they've heard half the story. If you think of 44%, it's a big number. No, it's not. It's less than half of mental disorder. The other half were not, of that 16,000, didn't have a mental disorder.
Yeah. Because
what was going on in their world?
Yeah. Truly, I'm not a medical expert. Again, we love to talk about how to solve the world problems and what let's say politicians on the world stage doing and how they're doing. But yet in our own backyard, our own life, nobody's there to hear the scream.
No.
On an intersection when it's raining, you have no umbrella. And many dads going to this.
No one could hear the scream of Graham and the Wattigans in the bush where I lived for a week. No one knew I was there. No, my phone never rang. All right, eating out of cans, just in the.
Have you feel betrayed by your friends?
I was betrayed by almost all my friends.
Is that so dads can expect this?
Absolutely, yeah. I got one or two mates. Drew's a mate that's been around since I was almost in nappy. He knows when I'm down. In fact, the fact I mentioned his name, there's this thing in the universe. He'll ring me today. You just know. But yeah, a lot of blokes let me down, and there's a reason for it. Is people, when they don't understand something, then they become uncomfortable. They don't know how to address it, or maybe. The biggest thing I noticed too is if I was in an environment that was family orientated and I didn't have my family, my kids with me, naturally I'm going to be emotional. But people don't want to be around you when you're emotional. They want to have a fun time, right? Or maybe you're looking for some support.
You're right.
You're looking for support. They don't know how to give you support. I don't. A lot of men let me down, but I don't. What's the word I'm looking for?
You don't blame them.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them. That's why I got involved, is to educate people. These numbers, I can cry these numbers till the cows come home. The suicide rate for men paying child support used to be measured in Parliament. Did you know that?
No.
And they stopped measuring it because the number was getting so out of control. I've got the document of the last one. And they don't measure. The term is fatals from parental payers, so people paying child support, because the whole child support system, very government run, very. That's a whole conversation itself. But look at men's health. One of the things that I was fighting for was for Parliament to recognise we need someone to be focusing on this. Now, we have a Minister for Women focusing on women, which is fantastic, and no one's saying we shouldn't do that. Yeah. We've got a minister looking after Indigenous and they have a role in society, and no one's asking for them to stop doing that.
What's the Minister for Men does?
Is there one?
Is it?
No, doesn't exist. There's no one even addressing this issue. And I'll just give you some stats that hasn't changed. And my message is that's just the last 5 years. Let's go back to my journey back to 2006. The ratio has not changed. And nobody.
Can I ask you something? So when you run for the parliament, you spoke with politicians in those days. What was the common response you got?
It's a nuclear bomb. The whole concept of this issue is so big, so problematic. There's errors everywhere. It's not working, but I'm not going to touch it because if I touch it, I won't have a job in 3 years' time. Politicians, I said before, they have a place in the world, but for politicians to take this seriously, we actually, the group that I was with when I was doing my journey in 17, 18, 19, they actually wrote the family policy for many political parties. So the political parties would go to groups like men's groups, for example, and ask, hey, if we were to change the law, if we were to change things, what should we be focusing on? And the group had written the policy for those political parties. And one person, I'm not here to put names up on the table, but one politician federally said, I'm going to back this. This needs to happen.
Good.
Right?
And
then did a deal for apprenticeships for their state and got more money for apprenticeships to get people into work, that they dropped the narrative and moved on.
You see, this is, from my point of view, right, I say this as a Mario Bekes, nobody else. I say admiring people who walk the walk, you know what I mean? And you're the one of those people because your experience is very, very valuable. When I was doing research on the books about this topic, there's not many books there. No. There's not many books there. However, there's many forums and sad stories and everything else. It breaks my heart. And as I say, I don't say that every separation it's in favor of the man or the woman, but it is an emotional train wreck because, as I said, one is the thing separation and divorce. One is a custody of kids. Then comes the money. Nobody goes into marriage or relationship by thinking one day I'm gonna do divorce, except celebrities. I'm seeing a lot in Australia. They're divorced, they are separated, whatever it is. She got a $10 million. I say she never go into that marriage because she loves him, but they're gonna get something out. But you put it all your valuable life lessons about separation and divorce and child custody into your book, Surviving Separation. My question is, what do you hope readers will take away from your book?
Learn from not just my mistakes and maybe my journey, but learn from my message comes from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples of tried and tested failures. Meaning, everyone thinks about walking to the politician with a message. I've tried that at many levels, at council level, state level, government level. I'm self-taught on the legislation. I'm self-taught on the constitution of all the states. And I'm also self-taught on the Australian Constitution. I've been at the top level. I've actually run for federal parliament. Do you know what that means? It means if I whisper I've got an issue, I have police standing behind me, guarding me. I had people making my life hard during that journey because they knew what I stood for. By the way, what do I stand for? I stand for family. I stand for kids having the right to have both parents, right? That's what I stand for, and that's what people don't know. If you don't know me, you would assume that I'm fighting for men's rights. Well, that's part of what the problem is I'm fighting for this, but it's easy to discount Graham because he's an angry white man.
That's my question I do have for you. Your battle is over a long time ago.
Yes.
But you're still fighting for the so many dads who are suffering in silence right now.
Sure.
And my question for you is directly, for every dad going now to that ordeal who wake up this morning and they have the AVO against them, they need to leave the house with a suitcase.
Yep. Or sometimes without, yep.
Sometimes without. What will be first step they should take? What is your advice?
Life's fantastic. You're alive. You've got everything in front of you. It's totally up to you. Don't worry about today. My advice to them is live life. I often share my story because it helps them navigate the emotion they're in on that day. So I align my message where I believe they're out there in their pathway.
Yeah.
But by giving the end goal that I found the most fantastic woman in the world. We've been together 6 years. We're engaged. We're getting married. We live our life together. We share everything. Well, I've got the most fantastic children. And now
How many kids do you have now?
I've got 2 of my own, and I've got 2 that are my partner's 2 boys. Yeah. I treat them as my own. And now I've got two grandchildren. The one that's with us, 2 years old, one to be born in June.
So let me just before we move into some other different areas now, let people understand. You were living in a third room with your parents at age of 30. Today you're happily engaged with a beautiful woman. You have 4 kids, 2 together, 2 on your own, plus 2 grandkids.
Yep.
You have a small property on some mountain.
We have our own farm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got an awesome career.
Isn't that good story for the many dads actually, like a lifeline to say like, look, I've been there. That's I say, Graham, I can't find proper words. I try to always, when I talk to you, I try to express my gratitude that you are actually the live example that it can be done. You lost everything, but you see today you rebuild yourself and you have the
life is rebuilding yourself all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, like even, my passion's motorbikes. You've seen
well, there's guys like, Graham, he's like a Mad Max, he's on a motorbike. Yeah, that's true.
I love motorbikes. I wasn't allowed to have a motorbike. That's an interesting conversation for another day. But, my partner and I went out and got our L's. Okay. As seniors, got our L's. I ride a Harley Davidson. Like, beat that.
I love you, man. When you're looking back in time, what was your lowest moment in your life? Doesn't necessarily be to separation, maybe something else. And what did you learn from it? If you can pinpoint,
Look, I think one of the lowest moments is when, my world, my inspiration passed away. That was my dad. And then what I understood at the time was community. When we had the funeral, as part of Army Cadets, they all turned up, 200 kids in uniform. Church was full, people from all walks of life. Ministers turned up, police turned up, the bishop ran the session. It's important that people know if you're doing good stuff. And what I've learned through my own journey is, if you do it for accolades, which a lot of people do,
of course,
right? And I get angry with that. If you're doing something expecting a pat on the back, or someone gets an awarded a public accommodation, and you know them extremely well, and that really doesn't align with their life or their behaviours or their morals. It's not important. What's important is that you're doing it for the right reasons. And your question about men today, they still don't have solutions. They still don't have a pathway. They still don't have mental health structures that help them. I know what those counsellors say. Been there, had a lot of them, had a lot of different variations. But I keep going. I'm the guy that'll keep trying to find more information. So you go to a counsellor, they tell you how things are. Go to a different one. Go to a third one. Go to a fourth one. Get different opinions. Start building up your knowledge base. If your issue is narcissism, go and learn narcissistic behaviour. I've probably read 30 books.
Why narcissism? Is this some trait in relationships? You see,
100% it is. And if you don't understand the red flags of narcissism and you're...
Can you share some of them for all our friends there? I've been in a relationship with a psychopath, but narcissist, I'm not sure can I spot narcissist. Psychopath, yes, but can you just, maybe it's the same thing?
Can I spot narcissists today?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Can you just give us small
Well,
insights how
you're
the
meeting-
man to spot narcissist.
If you understand the different behaviours of narcissism, one of them's love bombing, like someone that's really dropping a lot of love onto you, and you only known each other for 2 weeks, and they're throwing all this visualisation of how wonderful our relationship is, or how wonderful our future is going to be. You know, we'll get married one day, and we're going to do this, and you know, I love you, and you love me, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm 2 weeks into this relationship. Red flag.
I like it. This, yes,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
But for a bloke who's had his world torn apart,
Yeah, that is
right, your guard's down. Guess what you attract?
exactly that.
You
one.
attract the lioness, the beast, the guy, the lady that wants control. You attract that because they're very good at dropping everything you want to hear.
It's sweet talk, right? Sweet
Have
talk.
sweet talk.
Yeah.
Give you all their time. And you think you're on the top of the world. And one of the bit of advice I have in the book is for men is, in relationships, if a relationship's broken, stop. Don't move on to the next relationship. Give it 6 months. Work yourself out first.
Can I ask you,
Work out what
are
you
you
want.
mentioning anything about narcissism in your book?
I do.
Okay.
But there's chapter 2 coming.
Okay, tell us more.
Yeah, so the new book will be coming that's...
Can I have this book, please? I just want to show our listeners, viewers, guys. This is the book's Surviving Separation. I'm going to put in a description section below the link. You can purchase the book, contact Graham directly on his website. You're going to love it. So it's a chapter 2.
So the next book
Yeah.
is about defining narcissism. Because in this
Okay.
book we talk about the behaviours to be wary of, but I don't deep dive into the why. By reading literature over the last 20 years from psychologists, physiologists, all over the world, and getting their opinion of what human behaviour is, watching specialists on YouTube, and you start to understand and framing why things started to happen. And in my case, and it happened unfortunately twice, being in relationships that are not healthy for me, and in some cases not healthy for them either, because they've got things they need to deal with. But when your guard's down, guys, you actually attract the wrong type of person, and often you attract the same person
With same
that
traits,
you're
yeah.
actually with,
okay.
because you're missing those traits because you're so used to them.
I you know what? I can confirm this because I remember in my past, you go from one relationship and then you find out she has somebody, then you are somehow find yourself in a relationship with another woman who is even worse than the first one.
I was just about to say that, but my experience...
I don't know why is this why is this happening?
Yeah.
But now I can get that.
But you don't know any different. And
Yeah.
because you don't know, because your guard's down and the opportunist, narcissists don't know really they're opportunist, right?
Yeah.
They just think that they should be the person in the world.
Yeah.
You know, if their social media is 100% just them. So you've done a beautiful walk along a beach in Bali,
Yeah.
and then they take a selfie in the sunset and you're not in that photo, red flag. Why is that a red flag? Because it's a moment that they've experienced that you're part of,
Yeah.
but they're showing the world a perception of what they are, and it's about them only, and you're not in the picture.
Listen, I can't wait for a second book.
Oh, yeah.
Before we wind up, I have one more question. So you helped not hundreds, but thousands of men. And I truly believe with this episode, your interview, you're going to help millions of men over there. Now, my question is you help men with the free legal advice. You give the food, you help the people. You stood up in front of parliament. You stood up in front of the courts with them. I saw some images, community groups. My question is, what drives you, Graham, to keep giving back to society, to community? What drives you? Set up, man. We know this. I know you privately.
Do you know the win? I'm going to give you the win, and let's forget about my personal
Okay,
experiences,
yes,
which we talked about was the win. One of my things is to go to coffee with men. I don't interact. Alcohol's the demon in this. You don't want to be drinking, right? Drink later. Go to a coffee shop, have a coffee, and you just listen. What the win is when a dad, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the track, calls me up and says, "What I'm doing. Can we catch up for a coffee?" So my mindset is I remember them, this is where they were and these are the issues they had, and I've been invited to go see them again, which I really I really appreciate. And I go there and it's all about thanks. That's the win. Because his life is better today because I listened back then. I may not have given him the answers, but I gave him the faith that he can start looking for solutions, planning. And for me, that's the win. Or watching these fabulous men recreate themselves and see them win, see them spending time. A lot of them I don't hear from again. So it's a very weird relationship where I'll meet someone, I don't know them. We sit there and we share an intimate moment. It might be half hour, some of them 5 hours, right? It might be over the phone, it might be at a coffee shop, but you become a distant acquaintance and then you see them 5 years down the track on the family holiday, new partner, kids are involved, or in my case, there's grandkids coming. That's the return. That's the win. That's paying it forward. And if I can get them helping out two blokes, and then those two blokes helping out two blokes, this book, I'm not going to sell thousands of copies. In fact, if I sold one copy, but it got passed on to men and women can read this. It's not gendered. If you could read the book and you got so much out of it and it pushes you in the right direction and you go to another person, then instead of me just looking after my local community, it looks after the whole community. So that's what drives me.
This episode has potential to be life-changing for every person who's struggling, with a separation, legal battles, and particularly losing connection with their children, right? And your immensely painful life episode shows at the end it was a triumph for yourself.
So I'll give you one thing my brother gave me.
Yes.
Brother's a military guy.
Yeah.
And I was in a dark place. He could recognise, he didn't know what to say. And he said, you know what, Graham? She might win this little battle, but she's not going to win the war.
I think that we're going to leave it there, this interview, because I want to say to you something personal. Like, I know that this interview was quite emotional for you. I can see in your eyes. And I just want to say, on behalf to every person who is struggling, every person who's going through the pain, you're one of the very few people who took their own experience, put into the book, and give them manual to win the war and get out of that dark place where it's very painful and very harsh environment of the life, of the legal system, and everything else. Graham, thank you very much for being my guest today. But before we go, where the people can find your book as well?
Just search Surviving Separation. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Google Play. It'll be available in hopefully the mainstream book world likes it. There's a lot of work, and just so you know, it costs a lot of money to do this, right? It costs a lot of money to run for Parliament. It costs a lot of money to all that stuff. It's not about the money. It's about the message. If you want to find the solution that gets you to the next stage of your life, this is a manual. It'll lead you. It's actually got references to where to find the right information for you. It goes to. I've got all the law references in there. It's really the backbone of what you need to do, and then you need to then create your own pathway. But if you just Google GrahamMcFarland.com, you'll find all the links on there as well.
Graham, I want to say one more thing before we go. Thank you for being the beacon of hope for every person who is suffering this very moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Graham McFarland, I'm going to put in the description section how you can contact Graham, how you can purchase his book. And I want to say to you guys, after all, learn from Graham's example. Maybe some people in your life are going to win the battles, but it's up to you how you're going to win the war. One of the tools, it's a Graham book, Surviving Separation. Thank you, Graham.
Thanks, mate.